Monsters walk among us. Some are caught, their names etched into history, their crimes dissected in courtrooms and living rooms alike. But others vanish into the shadows, their true identities hidden, their motives forever a mystery. For investigators, these unsolved serial killer cases are a stain that never fades, a constant, haunting reminder that evil can remain nameless and free. Tonight, on Chilling Mysteries, we're diving deep into the world's most chilling unsolved serial killer cases. Cases that continue to torment detectives, baffle experts, and haunt the families of the lost. Let's start with the case that has become synonymous with the phrase, unsolved serial killer, the Zodiac Killer. For decades, the name Zodiac has conjured images of cryptic ciphers, taunting letters, and a faceless killer who terrorized Northern California in the late 1960s and early 1970s. The Zodiac claimed responsibility for at least 5 brutal murders, though he suggested in his letters that the true number was far higher. His victims were young couples, attacked in secluded areas, and a lone cab driver shot dead in the heart of San Francisco. But what made the Zodiac truly terrifying wasn't just the violence. It was his game. He sent letters to newspapers, each one signed with a mysterious symbol, a circle with a cross through it, and filled with ciphers, codes, and chilling boasts about his crimes. One letter contained a cryptogram that, when finally solved, revealed the Zodiac's twisted view of life and death. Yet some of the ciphers remain unbroken to this day. Despite a massive manhunt, hundreds of suspects, and decades of investigation, the Zodiac was never caught. DNA evidence failed to provide a match. Composite sketches led nowhere. And every few years, someone steps forward claiming to have solved the case, only for the evidence to crumble under scrutiny. The Zodiac's final known letter was sent in 1974, and then, nothing. Did he die? Did he simply stop? Or did he keep killing under a new name? For investigators, the case remains one of the most agonizing puzzles in criminal history. The killer's voice, preserved in those taunting letters, still echoes across the decades, a reminder of the evil that can hide in plain sight. But the Zodiac is not alone in America's gallery of unsolved monsters. The Long Island serial killer, sometimes called the Gilgo Beach Killer, has haunted New York's coastline for more than a decade. In December 2010, a police officer and his dog made a grim discovery: human remains buried in the sand along Ocean Parkway. That grisly find led to more searches, and more bodies. Ultimately, at least 10 sets of human remains were uncovered, many of them believed to be women who advertised escort services on Craigslist. The investigation has been plagued by missteps, infighting, and jurisdictional confusion. For years, the killer left a trail of victims, some dismembered, some wrapped in burlap, along the lonely stretches of Gilgo Beach. Despite advances in forensic technology, the identities of some victims remain unknown, and the killer's identity is a maddening enigma. Detectives believe the killer may have intimate knowledge of police procedures, given the care with which the bodies were hidden and the ways evidence was minimized at the scenes. The case took a dramatic turn in 2023, when a suspect was arrested and charged in connection with several of the murders. But even now, questions persist. Is the true Gilgo Beach Killer behind bars, or is the real predator still out there, watching as police chase shadows? For the families of the victims, the lack of closure is a daily torment, a wound that will not heal until the full truth comes out. Across the Atlantic, another nameless killer stalked the streets of London. Jack the Ripper is perhaps the most infamous unsolved serial killer of all time. In the autumn of 1888, the Ripper murdered at least 5 women in the Whitechapel district, each attack more brutal and frenzied than the last. The killer's knowledge of anatomy, the surgical precision of the mutilations, and the taunting letters sent to police. These details became the blueprint for modern serial murder. Despite the largest manhunt in Victorian England, Jack the Ripper was never caught. Theories abound. A failed doctor, a deranged nobleman, even a member of the royal family. Modern investigators have applied DNA techniques to century-old evidence, but the results are inconclusive. The Ripper's victims, Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, are often overshadowed by the killer's legend, but their stories are a stark reminder of the real human cost behind the mystery. What makes the Ripper case so haunting, even today, is the sense of unfinished business. The labyrinthine streets of Whitechapel still draw armchair detectives and conspiracy theorists, all hoping to crack the code that has eluded Scotland Yard for over a century. But the truth may have died with the killer, lost in the fog of Victorian London. Returning to the United States, we find another case that chills even the most hardened investigators, the Highway of Tears. Along a remote stretch of Highway 16 in British Columbia, dozens of women, mostly indigenous, disappeared between the 1970s and the present. Some bodies have been found, others remain missing, but the total number of victims is unknown. The cases share haunting similarities: hitchhiking, remote locations, and a police investigation hampered by racism and neglect. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police eventually admitted that a serial killer, or perhaps multiple killers, may be responsible for at least some of the disappearances. But the Highway of Tears remains a symbol of both unsolved violence and institutional failure. For the families, the lack of answers is compounded by the sense that their loved ones were forgotten. Even now, the road is a place of fear and sorrow, where justice seems always just out of reach. In the Midwest, another shadow stalked the highways. The I-70 killer, active in the early 1990s, claimed at least 6 lives across Indiana, Missouri, and Kansas. The victims were mostly young women working alone in small stores near Interstate 70, shot execution style with a .22 caliber firearm. The attacks were quick, efficient, and left almost no physical evidence. The killer seemed to vanish into thin air after each murder. Despite composite sketches and a clear modus operandi, the I-70 killer was never caught. The murders stopped as suddenly as they began, leaving investigators to wonder if the killer moved on, was imprisoned for another crime, or simply died. The sheer randomness and brutality of the attacks, and the lack of any apparent motive, make the case all the more chilling. Not all unsolved serial killer cases are decades old. In the early 2000s, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, was terrorized by a string of murders that became known as the work of the Baton Rouge serial killer. Between 1992 and 2004, at least 7 women were brutally murdered, their bodies found in remote locations. The killer's methods changed, complicating the investigation. Eventually, Derek Todd Lee was arrested and convicted for 2 of the murders, but many investigators believe he wasn't responsible for all the killings. Other suspects, including Sean Vincent Gillis, were also arrested, but questions linger. Was there more than one serial killer operating in Baton Rouge? Are there still victims whose cases have never been connected to the known killers? The uncertainty continues to haunt investigators, and the families of the missing. On the West Coast, another phantom killer has left a trail of devastation. The Freeway Phantom terrorized Washington, D.C., in the early 1970s, abducting and murdering at least 6 young African American girls. The killer left taunting notes, one of which was written in the handwriting of a 13-year-old victim. The message read, "This is tantamount to my insensitivity to people, especially women. I will admit the others when you catch me if you can." Despite a massive manhunt, the case remains unsolved, and the identity of the Freeway Phantom is still unknown. The lack of progress in the investigation has led to accusations of indifference and racism on the part of authorities. For the families, the pain of not knowing, and the fear that their daughters' cases were ignored because of their race, is a wound that has never healed. But the United States isn't alone in its unsolved horrors. In Japan, the Setagaya family murders remain one of the country's most baffling cases. On December 30, 2000, the Miyazawa family, father, mother, and 2 children, were brutally murdered in their home in Setagaya, a suburb of Tokyo. The killer lingered in the house for hours after the murders, eating food from the fridge, using the bathroom, and even surfing the internet. Despite a wealth of physical evidence, including the killer's DNA, fingerprints, and clothing, the case remains unsolved. The chilling detail that the murderer stayed in the house, seemingly unafraid of being caught, has disturbed investigators and the public alike. The Miyazawa family's home has become a symbol of innocence lost, and the killer's identity remains one of Japan's greatest criminal mysteries. Back in the United States, the case of the Colonial Parkway murders continues to baffle investigators. Between 1986 and 1989, at least 8 people were murdered along the Colonial Parkway in Virginia. The victims were young couples, attacked in their cars in secluded areas. Some were strangled, others stabbed, and some showed signs of attempted staging, windows rolled down, wallets left behind, headlights on. The FBI has long suspected a serial killer, but the case remains unsolved. The remoteness of the crime scenes, the lack of witnesses, and the mysterious similarities between the murders have fueled speculation for decades. For the families of the victims, the Parkway is a place of nightmares, where the ghosts of the past are never far away. One of the most disturbing unsolved serial killer cases is that of the Cleveland torso murderer, also known as the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run. In the 1930s, Cleveland was gripped by fear as dismembered bodies began to appear along the railroads and in the city's shantytowns. At least 12 victims, though some estimate as many as 20, were found, their bodies mutilated and decapitated. The killer targeted the city's most vulnerable, the homeless, the outcasts, the forgotten. Despite the best efforts of legendary lawman Eliot Ness, the case was never solved. The killer's identity remains a mystery, and the city's dark history continues to fascinate and horrify true crime enthusiasts to this day. Some unsolved serial killer cases are almost forgotten, their victims reduced to footnotes in criminal history. But for investigators, the case is never really close. In Chicago, between 2001 and the present, at least 51 women have been found strangled and dumped in abandoned buildings or vacant lots. Many of the victims were women of color, their deaths dismissed as isolated incidents. But a 2019 report by the Chicago Tribune revealed patterns that strongly suggested a serial killer, or killers, are still at large. The Chicago Strangler, as the media has dubbed the unknown perpetrator, remains unidentified. Police have reopened cold cases, but the killings continue. For the families, the lack of answers is a living nightmare. For detectives, the case is a reminder that evil can persist, undetected, in the heart of a modern city. No list of unsolved serial killer cases would be complete without mentioning the monster of Florence. Between 1968 and 1985, the Italian countryside was terrorized by a killer who murdered at least 16 people, mostly couples parked in cars, seeking privacy. The killer's methods were brutal, and the crimes were often accompanied by mutilations that shocked even seasoned investigators. The investigation was marred by false confessions, wrongful arrests, and a media circus that left the real killer free to strike again and again. To this day, the monster of Florence's identity is unknown, and the case remains one of Europe's most chilling unsolved mysteries. Why do these cases haunt us so? It's not just the brutality of the crimes, or the number of victims. It's the absence of answers, the empty spaces where justice should be. For investigators, every unsolved case is a wound that never fully heals. For the families, closure is a word that rings hollow. And for the rest of us, these stories are a chilling reminder that the world is not as safe as we'd like to believe. Somewhere out there, the shadows still move. The killers may be dead, or they may be living quiet lives, their secrets buried deep. But the questions remain. Who were they? Why did they kill? And could they be watching, even now, as we search for answers? On Chilling Mysteries, we believe every victim deserves justice. Every case deserves to be solved. And every story deserves to be told. If you found this deep dive into the world's most haunting unsolved serial killer cases compelling, don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and join our community of true crime enthusiasts. Share your theories in the comments. Which of these cases haunts you the most? And remember, the shadows may be deep, but the search for the truth never ends. Stay safe, stay curious, and keep watching Chilling Mysteries.